Well, Puerto Rico was in massive debt even before these devastating hurricanes. So what happens to all those bonds right now? Steve Leisman joins us now with the other part of the story.
They go down in value, Melissa. The
Yes.
value of Puerto Rican debt plunging again today to a new all-time low as it increasingly dawns on bondholders. The ability of the indebted island nation to repay has been severely impacted by the devastation from Hurricane Maria. Puerto Rico, these are general obligation bonds due in 2035. They are a benchmark there. They are down, just call it 50 cents on the dollar is what they are now. That's a new all-time low if it ended the day there. The extent of the damage still not counted, but the situation described as dire, you just heard that in a report. In addition to lost lives and uprooted lives, from a financial perspective, Maria has likely done lasting damage to the island nation's economic output and population. Sorry, it's not a nation. Moody's says severe damage to infrastructure and private property that is not offset through federal relief efforts will signal reduced economic capacity. What's that mean? It means Puerto Rico's ability to pay its debt, it's already in bankruptcy proceedings, further diminished. And the translation of that is some form of additional debt relief seems inevitable. Now, there's no call for that now, not from the president, not in Congress, but the Dow Jones reported the federal board overseeing the bankruptcy is likely to revisit the island's financial plan this week. The board on Friday allowed the island governments to shift up to $1 billion of budget funds over to emergency measures. The question, this is my opinion here from an economics point of view, it's not Puerto Rico does it get an easier debt load. The only question is when the market and officialdom realize that the situation is dramatically changed and that debt needs to change as well.
Well, let's dig into that a little bit more here.
Yeah.
All right, joining us now, Salim Furth, the Heritage Foundation, who once referred to Puerto Rico as a failed progressive paradise, and Eric Lecomte with Jubilee USA, a developmental organization supporting debt relief and debt forgiveness for the world's poorest. Salim, do you believe that Puerto Rico should be allowed to default on its debt, but that there should be some intermediary so that the bondholders do not bear the full loss, that they work out the ability to not repay it, but not screw over, for lack of a better term, the bondholders?
No, I think the bondholders should have to hold the bag. They bought into this. You could see where the island's finances were going. Obviously, the game has changed now. We saw these images on the segment right before. Puerto Rico is absolutely devastated. No one's getting a cent out of there unless it's rebuilt. Right now, the priority should be waiving the Jones Act for at least a year to allow Puerto Rico a chance to get back on its feet. We can talk about debts another day, but if I was a bondholder, I would be writing this off right now.
Well, the Jones Act, by the way, what you're referring to is a law, a very obscure law that effectively says if you're going to ship in the U.S. Virgin Islands and parts of the Caribbean, it has to be under a U.S. flagged vessel. Many criticize it for raising costs. That said, I'll push back a little bit there, Salim, because you said they would have, the bondholders should be holding the bag. In any contract, there's something called a force majeure, basically an act of God, right? Godzilla comes up out of the ocean, smashes your ship. Something was unplanned. This is the worst storm in effectively 100 years for Puerto Rico. You think bondholders shouldn't have any recourse? Like nobody knew that this was going to happen. Even the worst storm wasn't this bad.
So, in any government default, there's going to be some reason, some demographic collapse, some natural disaster that you can point to. But we all know that Puerto Rico didn't have the money to pay these debts even before the hurricane. The question was, could they grow enough to repay some of it? So no, I don't think that we should be stepping in and using federal taxpayer dollars to bail out people who made a bad investment. I think that's the reality. It sets a really bad precedent for states and municipalities around the country if we bail these people out.
But there's not a precedent for a Category 4 hurricane, the eye of it going directly down the center of the island and almost completely wiping out the productive capacity, at least for a time. Let me bring Eric in, Eric Lecomte, on this issue here. Eric, you have called publicly your organization for a debt relief. What would that look like in your opinion? And taking into account what Brian is saying, a fair mix here. Is it one that takes it all from the bondholders, or does the government step in part to bail these bondholders out?
Well, I think that's a really important question. I think the reality is that we are dealing with a very serious humanitarian crisis on the island. More than 90% of the island without power, without clean drinking water. So we know that the stakes are different now than they were 3 weeks ago. In terms of what that means for bondholders and a debt restructuring, Puerto Rico was already in a bankruptcy process.
Right.
In fact, the largest bankruptcy process
So
ever
Eric,
in
I'm
the
sorry to cut
history
you
of
off,
the
but
United States.
we're tight on time. Tell us what it would look like. There's
Well,
$74 billion in debt right now. It's already in bankruptcy proceedings. Should it be written down? Give us a quick blueprint on that.
Yes, I mean, much of it should be written down. It should be restructured. What's been very popular in terms of various ideas among all actors is looking at new restructured bonds that are linked to GDP. But in the short term, we're looking at a complete moratorium on debt payments. It's absolutely essential. In the long term, we're looking at a restructuring where we do have significant debt reduction, significant debt cancellation, and we don't see any profitability for bonds until economic growth returns to the islands, which is going to be some time from now.
Salim, Eric, and Steve, thank you all very much. No doubt a conversation that will continue in the next couple of days.